so you can kind of see what we have going on here. And what we're going to talk about today is how do you present this type of view for your user community? An actionable service catalog, which is, the best way to have users come in through the portal, because I think, as most of us know, a service catalog is really a template that's built out there that ensures that all of the proper questions get answered on the front end, so that when that ticket hits the service desk, there's enough information there for the agent to immediately to begin working on it, as opposed to having to pick up the phone and call the user and try to say, what is it you're asking for here? Because again, we will have predefined those mandatory questions that we need to get answered. More importantly, though, and the reason we call it an actionable service catalog, is typically you will have predefined all of the back-end fulfillment that has to take place based on what they were requesting. So we'll know if there need to be multiple tasks created that are associated with that event. We'll know where the tickets, be it the service request or the associated task, to whom do they need to be assigned, or any approvals needed, i.e. what is the workflow that goes with that particular request as opposed to the way another request might be. So it's that automation of the user front end piece, but more importantly, the fulfillment piece on the back end that really make this, number one, a time saver and an easy place for the end user to go. But since it's a template, it also provides a consistency in how we're doing things, how we're categorizing things, what kind of metrics we're then able to capture. So in my little example here, you can see I'm simulating that in my FootPrints environment, I obviously have the IT service desk with all of its issues that they would have out there, but I'm indicating in mind that, hey, I've got a facilities workspace or container that's been built out, and they've got their own forms and their own workflows and their own business rules. I've got an HR department that again has its own forms and rules and workflows. But for the end user, you don't want them to have to go to 15 different places to do things within your company. If they could come somewhere like this and be able to get to whatever grouping they need to, then it makes it very easy for them to come in and do things. So now, how you define your categories and your trees are totally up to you, and I'm going to show you how you actually do that. But let's just look at an example of what that end user might see. If they were to click on Service Desk, I've then broken mine down in, well, are you looking for access to systems? Are you looking for hardware? Are you looking for software? Kind of made sense to me. In this case, let's say he's looking for new hardware. Well, now I have further broken that down. Is it mobile hardware? Is it PCs? Is it a phone? Are you looking for network servers? What is it that you're looking for? And again, I'm going to break mine down to where I want mobile hardware that's either a tablet, a phone, or a laptop. And so when you're doing a service catalog, one of the best practices that you follow is you kind of play back to the end user, okay, if you request this, which you've just clicked on, in this case, it would give you the option of getting an iPad, a Surface tablet, or an Android device. We've stated things like turnaround time. We could have put whatever messaging we wanted here for that end user to make sure they knew what they wanted. But if they did, then they say, yep, that's exactly what I need. I'm going to request this service. So this is where we're then pulling in that service catalog template. Notice that we basically automatically start filling out the form. All right, you clicked on New Tablet PC, so that was simple enough. We happen to know that's hardware. We know the particular type of item you're requesting is a tablet as opposed to other things we could have configured there. We again reiterate what are your options, what are your choices that you have here. But now I've got a required field that the user's got to tell me this before they submit the ticket. So do you want the Android, the Surface, or the Apple, the iPad? So they pick the one, and then we dynamically say, well, there are multiple versions of that device. So which one do you want out there? And then I've asked another question is, I'm assuming this is a Wi-Fi only model. If you, as the end user, were to change that and say yes, then again, I'm going to dynamically pop another question. Since you've said yes, I need to know which one of the carriers you're looking for. They submit that off, and now it becomes a ticket or perhaps multiple tickets on the back end. Again, the end user doesn't need to be concerned with that. And we talked about that the fulfillment processes are already built in. So in this particular case, the first thing that would happen would be that person's manager would get an approval email saying, requested a $600 Apple iPad. Do you agree, yes or no? And only if that manager were to come in and approve it, would we do the other things that were associated with fulfilling this request, which would be, order the tablet or provision the tablet and, add them to the Verizon data plan, whatever the components, pieces, and parts were, is kind of what you would be doing. So that's just one example if you were doing it from an IT perspective. Maybe you're doing something from a human resources perspective, right? And as a hiring manager, you're coming into here and saying, hey, I've been given permission to bring on a new hire. Again, it states some terms around the best practices there. They come in and say, yep, this is what I want. They just have to put in, well, who is the name of the you hire in the description. We already know it's an onboarding request. We know that it's going to go in as a pending approval ticket. And again, we're restating to the end user, to the requesting user, hey, if you do this for this standard new employee, we're going to have 4 tasks that are associated with it. One is to create an Active Directory account. One is to create access to SCM and Director, and another group to issue the badges and security passes and parking passes and all of those things. So again, if you're sure that that's what you want, you've got it out there. In this case, I really didn't even have to ask any other questions other what is the name, and I'll tell you why that's important in a few minutes. The name of the new person, you submit that out. Again, it starts to route through whatever the process was. So how did I get this presentation level out there to the end users? Let me show you a little bit about how we did that. So I'm going to come back over here now where I'm logged into FootPrints as an administrator over here, and I'll go in and collapse that. That's just the landing page. In order to build your category tree, you would go in under the administrative tab that you're doing there. You would go down to your service portfolio selection. You click on service portfolio as you go through there, and then you can see here is my category tree for my IT service catalog. So if I were to expand that out, you can see here, these are the things that end user just saw. They saw human resources, they saw facilities, loan administration, training, goals for operations, and service desk. So this is where you come in and define that, and this is where I could add additional categories in here. I could remove some if they're no longer valid. So a simple way to come in and do it, and as you click on each one of these, of course, you have the ability to, of course, give it a unique name. You have an ability to go out and get an icon that's representative of what that request would be, and that's kind of how you build out what the offering looks like. So now that I know what I'm going to offer out there, now I've got to figure out, well, how do you actually build the templates, and then how do you build some of the workflow that you've got in there. So in this case, I want to kind of go in, as we talked about, these are really a set of templates if you think about it. So I'm going to go into my ITSM workspace container, which RightStar IT Service Management. And, typically a service catalog is defined over here under our service request. So if I click on that, one of the note fields you'll see over on the left is, this is where I went in and I defined, well, what are those templates that we're going to do? So you can see here, I've got any number of templates out here. The one we showed you, of course, was getting the new tablet PC. That's the one that we showed you in self-service. So if we look at that, you can see that I built that to where it says, if you click on this, then this is what we're going to show to the end user out there. It's going to put in that it's for a new tablet PC. It's going to automatically embed the description in there. It's going to automatically put in here what the source was. I'm going to display what the turnaround time is, and I'm going to assign that the description is a new tablet PC, which has a request type of hardware request, which has the requested item, of course, was that. So that's just an example of what one of those might look like. The other one that we did out there, or we talked about, was the new hire request, right? So let's highlight that one and take a look at how that one is similar but a little bit different, because the first one was kind of a one-step, maybe two-step fulfillment process. Person wants a tablet. Once you get approval, you order and you do a couple of things. In this particular case, though, on a new hire, again, I'm going to define, well, what does that initial request form look like? And if you will remember, down in the description of that, we automatically say, hey, we're going to create an AD account and a couple of accesses and physical security. We are going to automatically assign it as a new hire request, and we're going to set the status of that request to pending approval. So in this one, since I've already defined, well, what are the things we're going to do? All oncoming onboarding employees of this category type all get these four things. Well, that's where I went out and got other templates that I also had built. So templates could be a change template, they could be a service request template, or they could be what are known as subtask master or subtask templates. So in addition to having this new hire template that we looked at out here where I did that, I also have built templates for creating that AD account, creating the access for director and physical and SCM, and I've got one out there for the physical security. So what happens there, if I had yet a fifth task I wanted to associate with the new hire process, I would just indicate, hey, I'm going to create another subtask out there, and then I would go out and I would peruse all of my other templates that I've already built, my other tasks, and maybe grab one of those and add it, and then there would be a fifth thing that would automatically get applied for this particular one. So that's kind of the logic of how it works, right? You create the overall request that you're doing. In this case, it was the new hire. When I looked at the new hire, it could be pretty much standalone. I could have any number of actions that I wanted to take on it. Now, I know some of you are probably asking out there saying, well, that's nice. And yeah, there are a number of things that, everybody kind of gets, but there could be one-offs, or there could be things that happen based on the category of the employee, or maybe how they answered a question. Maybe a certain category of new hire, we give them the option of, do you want a laptop or do you want a desktop? So I can't predefine, assign them a desktop, assign them a laptop. I've got to have some logic that says where that would come into play. So when you need what I call a dynamic subtask created, you really do that over under your business rules, right? So under my business rules, I could come in here and say, okay, I'm going to create an after save rule, and we're going to call this, give a laptop is what we're doing here as I do that. And, you guys have done business rules, so I've got to add a trigger. Well, what does this one? So this anytime we create or we update that service request that I want this rule to be evaluated here. And now I'm going to add a condition. And in my case of this onboarding, the request type needs to be equal to that, because that's what's kicking off this particular one. So in this case, the request type needed to be onboarding was the way I had configured that template. So I need to create that trigger that's out there. And then I need to go in and say, okay, well, if we save it and if it does say onboarding, what are the actions? I want to dynamically now come in and create one of those records. So I'm going to add a new action. And what my action is going to be is I want to create a new record, right, as far as what I'm trying to do there. And so it just gives you a little reminder that not to get yourself in a loop there. So what type of record do I want to create there as I go in and create that new record? Where do I want it? Which container do I want it in? So I'm going to actually pretend that I'm getting this from a completely different workspace, and I've got a workspace out there I just call my test group. And then it's going to ask, well, what type of record type are you creating here? Is it a ticket? Is it a service request? What is it that you want? And then you would pick your template. So to show you what that actually looks like, I've already got one of these out there because I want to actually create a new rule here. So I'll go down here, and here's where we're creating a subtask on an after save rule. So what this says, and what I was kind of showing you how you would do it is, hey, we want to give a laptop over to that person, and that's on create of a ticket. What we want to do is if the request type is equal to onboarding, we want to create a new record that's a subtask record in the in that thing, and we want to use the quick template for laptop. Again, another predefined template. That way, based on how a question was answered or whatever the criteria was, instead of it being a static that everybody gets these 5 things, 6 things, whatever they may be, that's where you can then go in and dynamically do things. That's where you could also go in if for some reason you needed a couple of 3 of these tasks to be sequenced. I would use a business rule to make sure that I presented them in the order in which I wanted them, and I wouldn't present the next one until I could, verify via business rule that the prior one had been closed out there. So we've looked at some examples of what the end user sees. We've looked at an example of how you actually build the category tree. We've now looked at an example of how you could have a kind of a single level template. I just want a new tablet, or a multi-level template where I've got a bunch of subtasks already associated with it, with or without a dynamic business rule subtask or multiple subtasks being included in it. So then the next thing to think about is, well, then you showed how you figured the tree. How do you then map all of that actions together? How do you build the back-end process flows? So to do that, you would come up here and you would actually go to your service portfolio. And under your service portfolio, you want to come in and you want to view your different services, right? So these are the services that I've done out there, and this should look familiar to you again. It was that new tablet PC, new mobile phone, new laptop, loan, because here was my new hiring. So if I go in under my new hire process, that was my 13th one I had built out there, this kind of shows you what I did. I went up there and said, okay, this is the action around the new hire process. First out, I pulled an image to display in self-service. Sorry about that. UPS man at the door there. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I should have shut that front door. A little excitement in our afternoon. So anyway, as I said, we had an image for HR. We said, hey, this is a request to be used for onboarding a non-executive new employee. We've obviously got the information out here. So this is where I said, well, what template are we using? What's the workflow? Well, we grabbed the new hire request template, and that's under this IT service catalog, human resources, personnel, if you remember. I didn't associate a price or a cost with it. I certainly could have done that. I'm kind of the owner of it and the one who manages this particular request out there. So this is how you all link it all together to actually create your flows out there. And if I wanted to restrict this to certain users, I could certainly come out there and do that as you come out and put that information in. But they are the essential steps that you've got to do to figure out what it is you want to offer through self-service, build your category tree, which was, again, up here under the administration, and I just went down to the service portfolio and built the category tree. Then the critical part is to then go in and create your different templates that you want to use there. And you kind of see here the business rules, but here with all the different templates. So also important to understand is the template, like for example on this new hire, it becomes the master or the upper level of what you're doing. But then I'm grabbing other templates which are really just subtask templates, like the create the AD account and the give the director access. So even though they're all listed here together, some are standalone and some become subcomponents of others. And keep in mind when you build these, realize that you may use these in more than one request. So for example, this was that new hire request and we had create an AD account and give access to a particular program. Well, I could have another service catalog out there for maybe bringing on a contractor, and maybe the contractor needs to get access to this one application, we'll say this director access application, because that's what he was specifically hired and brought in to work on. So by logically creating these templates, realize they are reusable, if you would, as you go through and you're able to do that. The other thing that I would point out is that even though I kind of built this all through the self-service portal, which is where you really want to use a service catalog, once you build those out, keep in mind, this is obviously I'm in as an agent now, the agent could come in here and say, I want to create a new service request. And even though they're not coming through the pretty icon front-end portal to do it, everything that showed up there is also available here in a drop-down for the agent. So again, if that agent, if the hiring manager called the service desk and said, hey, I've been given permission to bring on a new employee 2 weeks hence, they could just go, okay, Susan, what is the name of your new employee that you're bringing on board? And Susan replies, well, it's going to be Frank Jones is the new employee. As soon as that record gets saved off, notice that it's going to, because it used that same template, it's going to automatically put it into a pending approval state. It automatically set that request type to onboarding, because if you remember, we triggered a couple of their business rules by that. And the other thing that it did was it automatically put this in an approval state, in which case they could come into the ticket and approval, and here are the people that could approve it, or as I have mentioned before, if you are an approver and you're not someone who has a license in FootPrint Service Corps, you can do that same approval via email. But once that new hire request got approved, again, whether it came from self-service or in this case where the agent just picked the template, you can then say that, okay, now that it's been approved, here are those 4 things that have to be done. And notice that I've got that business rule active that I just showed you about that loaner laptop. Well, there's where that business rule fired and added yet another item to this one. So we had the static 4, the business rule kicked in and added the one other subtask request that goes out there. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And the first time you do one of these, it's a little confusing as to what the steps are. That's why I thought this might help. This is certainly going to be recorded. We'll put it out on our YouTube channel in case someone wants to review this in the future. But it's certainly a way to automate the system for yourself and to make things much easier for those end users when they come in and are presented with a view like this. This looks relatively simple. It looks modern. It's easy to use. Again, it can traverse multiple groups within your organization. So hopefully you found that helpful. I appreciate your attendance today and look forward to seeing you at another system in the future there. So with that, I'm going to end.